Welcome to the Possibility Hub video series. I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, an advocate for awakening, encouragement, and creating opportunities for an expansion of awareness and consciousness. In this episode, I'm once again in conversation with Matthew Ryan, the developer of an energetic healing modality called Gamma Wave Healing. And this time, we're talking about the Auroras and the cities in the sky. Hello again, Matthew. I'm so excited about our next conversation, or this conversation, and where it's going to lead us, because we had such an interesting conversation last time on the solar activities and solar flares, and I know it's garnered a lot of attention. And we touched, just at the end, we got into the auroras, or like the northern lights. And you told me that you'd also watched his Dark Materials, that wonderful series by Philip Pullman. It's a trilogy. And I know 2 of the books have already been made into a series. I believe the 3rd series will come out next year. It was delayed because of all these issues. But in the very first episode, we see the aurora and we see a city in the sky. They allude to that. And it's funny because actually one of my mentors suggested that we watch his Dark Materials, because there's, a lot of other things in there about different dimensions, different realities. And then it brought to mind that about 5 years ago, there was a video posted. It was even reported on CNN that, not that anything is gospel with CNN, but exactly. It was just incredible that it actually got into mainstream media, about a city that was seen in the sky, in the clouds above China. And I watched just that short snippet, and it is clearly a city. It's not kind of an illusion, but it makes you wonder, with all the psyops, and also the fact that, the holographic reality, was it a test in terms of a hologram? Because there has been talk of a psyop created where there's a holographic invasion of UFOs, or unidentified flying objects. And so I wondered if you had a different take on it, because, as I said, I know you also watched his Dark Materials, and I've never got to see the Northern Lights yet, but it certainly inspired me that the cities in the sky. And often when I go out into the desert here, you look up and you wonder what you're really seeing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on again. It's a pleasure to have another conversation with you. I think this is a super interesting topic, and covering from the aurora to multidimensionality to holographic reality to these cities in the sky. I think that they're all maybe not directly tied in together, but it really feels like there is something around this multidimensionality that is expressing into our world right now, and
like a bleed through almost, because
exactly.
There are many realities in the same space, and just on a different rotational spin. And are there opportunities sometimes to sort of see through time?
Yes. Yeah, I really believe that is a phenomenon that is occurring right now worldwide. I have clients all over the world that I speak to, and many people are having these experiences where they're having that kind of bleed through, or I talk about it often as being like timeline collapses or reality thread collapses, that it seems like these different aspects of our multidimensional experience are weaving themselves back into kind of a cohesive, unified consensus reality of our own now that is multidimensional. The aurora, like you were saying, with the show, his Dark Materials, and how the aurora plays this role of being kind of like, in their world, for those that don't know the story, it's it's really a beautiful representation actually of different types of reality threads or different kind of dimensional experiences, because the world that this is set in is very much like our world, but it is slightly different. There are these little tiny nuances of differences, different kind of histories and timelines. And in their world, these aurora seem to be an indicator or maybe a vector for this multidimensionality to express itself. And then the main characters, they're able to see, and when they look into the aurora, they see the city floating there. And or maybe it's not floating, maybe it's like accessing into where the city exists. And these are experiences actually that I have had in different ways, and including recently really had an amazing experience going back probably about 2 months ago now, where I was being compelled, urged to lay out in the sunlight every single day, to consciously breathe in the sunlight and flood all the cells in my body with the sunlight. And as I'm laying there with my eyelids closed, I'm seeing geometries on the insides of my eyelids. So it's like perceiving the code coming in on the light. And I had this one moment where I was deep into a meditation while I'm laying there, and my consciousness dropped into like a deep theta state where I could feel like I was almost about to fall asleep. And suddenly I started perceiving something that was kind of like a really overexposed photograph, where it was like really hot, like really white, and I couldn't see any detail. And it began to kind of form without me focusing on it. And suddenly I was aware that I was observing a city. And my consciousness was like, oh my God, this is one of these like multidimensional cities. And right when I had that thought, it
Oof.
vanished. Yeah, and I was no longer able to see it. And so I understand that based on all of my experience in working with energy, over the last 15, 20 years. I understand that to mean that was real perception of something, because what happens when the logical mind turns its focus towards something consciously, a lot of times it kind of narrows our perceptual bandwidth. And suddenly, as soon as my conscious mind was like, oh my gosh, that's a city, it vanished. But it didn't vanish. It was me switching frequency maybe, or making a misalignment to being able to perceive it. So these are very real things that people are experiencing. And I think that's being seeded into the consciousness through certain types of like, mainstream entertainment and things like that, like his dark materials.
So what do you make of what was seen in China? I don't know whether you had an opportunity to see that footage. As I said, it was just a short clip. Do you think it was holographic, or do you think it was, as we said, a bleed through? And then you also mentioned, about timelines. And I'm reminded of Project Looking Glass, where, they said there was a convergence. There was a particular time where there was going to be a convergence of timelines.
Mm-hmm.
And are we at that convergence of timelines? And of course, we're in, one universe, but there's also the parallel universe, or Tara. There's so many ways that it could go. And also look at where we're at right now. Are we in a reset, or are we in an awakening? Which way are we kind of like going? And are these cities in the sky, or when you see that, is that there's hope, there's something that's already there?
Well, those are all really good questions. As far as the event that occurred in China, I remember when that happened, I was able to catch it within probably 24 hours. I caught it when the information made its way around the internet. I'm not 100% clear on my own determination of what that was. If anything, it felt like, in looking at the videos and seeing people's reactions, it felt like it was potentially a bleed through. But we do know, though, that, like, as you were mentioning with the fake alien invasion, that's Project Bluebeam is the name for that project, where extremely advanced holographic technology would be projected in order to create this appearance of a UFO alien invasion, and which is all nonsense. But that technology it does exist, and it's extremely adept at conveying reality. And so um, that it's a hard thing to determine, but that my understanding though is that that was not an isolated incident. Although that one in China kind of made the rounds,
Yes.
there are places all around the world where people are observing these types of things. Now, whether or not that's due to some kind of nefarious attempt to continue to control the population, I'm not super sure, but I do know that the bleed through is occurring, and it's occurring all over the place. And then, like when you say when you talk about these technologies like Looking Glass, for those that aren't familiar with that, again, this the whistleblowers that had come forward that worked on either Project Looking Glass or like the Montauk chair, these projects where they were using extraterrestrial technology to remote view future events, they all did move towards a convergence point, which I believe was centered around 2012 with the Montauk chair. I'm not sure about Looking Glass. And as they got closer and closer to that convergence, there was less and less and less detail available to them about the way things would look. And I understand that to be an expression of like what's happening with these timeline collapses, how the multidimensionality is returning into a cohesive stream of experience. And there are other technologies that are still classified that are like Looking Glass, but their perspective and how they're looking is different. It's not looking forward. I believe it's looking backwards from a future perspective. And so these things are super interesting, and they're very real. And I have a feeling that as we go forward in time, we're going to be finding out more and more about this type of technology, as well as the nature of our reality that we think that we understand.
Now, I know that one of your guides is from Alpha Centauri.
Mhm.
And when you connect with many people who are able to connect with other aspects, we could say it's other aspects of yourself, because after all, we are vast, we are more than this physical form, or perhaps you view it as something or a different consciousness.
Mhm.
So many people who have that ability often state that it's another version of themselves from the future, giving information from the future. So I
Uh-huh.
wondered if you could tell me more about your connection with the beings from Alpha Centauri.
Sure. The experience that I had with the close encounter and was under regression, I ended up discovering that these beings were from Alpha Centauri. And this is, we don't hear a lot about Alpha Centauri within the kind of UFO star being community. There's not a lot of information out there, and most of the information that I've come across, it has these beings portrayed as being negative, which is just absolutely a farce. They have extremely advanced technology, and they are essentially cloaking their civilization on their planet that is orbiting Alpha Centauri, which is one of our closest neighbors. It's a little over 4 light years away from Earth. And they're extremely advanced. Time and space mean nothing to these beings. They can operate any when, anyhow, anywhere in time. And it's interesting you mentioned the future self aspect, and I've experienced that directly through my qigong practice, through healing work, where I have become clear that I'm receiving like what I would call my intuition in many ways, is actually my future self, like my future avatar self that has crossed the threshold of the phase shift and is sending information back to myself now. So that's absolutely a real experience for many people. In the case of my Alpha Centauri guides, it's actually the opposite. She's from the past. And so this was a really interesting thing, because in the real time of the experience, when the UFO came down above me and then left, it was all happening in real time within my consensus reality. But under the hypnotic regression, when I was able to retrieve the information of the experience, we were shown that the primary being on board, there were two beings on board the craft, and the main one, who is my guide, is actually one of my past lives. So there was what I would call a past life, relative,
Yeah,
again, at the
yes,
flow
because
of
there is no
time and all
such
of that.
thing.
Right, and no such thing. But so this other life experience of mine in linear time was approximately 50,000 years ago, where these these beings from Alpha Centauri were actively living on Earth and were functioning kind of as like stewards or caretakers in a way for the human civilization that was living there. And she came forward in time with their technology, with these craft. They were able to come forward in time to find herself, me, like finding the frequency signature of her DNA, which was in my DNA. They isolated it. I believe that it was like it wasn't a random encounter. This was like an arrangement where I was intuitively compelled to go on this hike, and they came in and found me at that moment. So as far as that goes, though, with that relationship, the consciousness of these beings and the consciousness of us, I would I would say, is able to transit multidimensionally. So I can be in real-time communication with her. As soon as I have the intention is like the radio dial that tunes you into the radio station, tunes you into the right frequency. So as soon as my intention says I'm going to contact my guide, she is immediately available in my field, and I have real-time dialogue, telepathically, I guess we would call that. And they're magnificently advanced beings, and with huge compassionate hearts that are here helping, even though they're very much kind of withdrawn out of the limelight.
So, I mean, we're really digging into that's time travel of a different nature.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, we know that there's technology around, and they've been dabbling in that for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you also talked about tuning into the right frequency or oscillation,
Absolutely.
as I like to call it. So really, if you think about the cities in the sky and what we see, then that's a mass tuning in of a frequency. And is that city in the sky tuning into us? Or are we tuning into it? And where's the meet? Where's the bleed through?
Yeah.
Because it opens the door again to our own magnificence and how much potential we have,
Yes.
without going into this technology, that technology, that just within us we have these
Absolutely.
abilities. And I know that's part
Absolutely.
of what you do to empower people to, clear the dross, clear the clutter, so that people can be more, and I know it's a lot of the work that I do, to be more of who you are and less of who
Yes.
you're really not. Because when you clear the clutter, and it really, when I say, people say that phrase, looking for a needle in a haystack, get rid of the hay, the needles are there, so get rid of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% that what we see with all of this technology that is so incredible that we have in our world, and even with what is shown to us, is way behind what really exists. There's massive suppression of technology that we are allowed to have. But even with what we have that is so extraordinary, it pales in comparison to the organic technology that we are encoded with, that this human body, this vessel for our consciousness, is like a rocket ship that can like launch our consciousness. And so absolutely, these types of communication, this multidimensional perception, this is awakening all over the world with everybody. And I think that these levels of awareness have been around for a very long time as well. Like we see stories that, even like in kind of mainstream pop culture with the Hayao Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli animation studio out of Japan. Back in the 80s, they made a movie called Castle in the Sky that is kind of set in one of these alternative realities, almost like an Atlantean type of technology, like combining steam engines but with energy. And there literally are these cities like floating in the sky. And so these stories have been around for a very long time, and I believe that what they're hinting at is the ability of people through time to have these types of multidimensional perceptions, and being able to to access other states of consciousness and reality. And this is awakening now worldwide as people are beginning to perceive things like what I call the universal light grid, seeing the geometric patterns in the sky, and these types of things. I believe are aspects of this multidimensionality that's awakening, and our inherent ability is so superior to what we believe that it is, that we literally could create. I've been told multiple times by my guides, if humanity is so powerful, that if only we would believe it, we could literally create a star, like with our intention. We could manifest a star. But we don't even remotely believe that that's something that is possible because of the way that we've been taught about the nature of reality.
Look, I'm very much into we are totally dumbed down, and we don't have, I'm a master firewalk instructor, so I teach people to walk across burning hot coals, and people often go, why? It's because you're doing something that you've been told is impossible, and when you do it, it starts to blow the boundaries. And then you read books like the many masters of the Far East. That series of books from the late 1800s.
Life and Teachings of the Masters. Yeah,
I love that series. And
amazing.
And Walking on Water. You've got those amazing, cliff faces, but carved monasteries in the wall, and they're here one minute and they're there the next. And when they in that book, they actually document, because the group splits. Some of the group are in the Himalayas, others are in Tibet, but they really document the time the masters are with them. And then when they do get together again, they look at the times, and that if the masters were here, then instantly they could demanifest and remanifest somewhere else. And also to manifest feasts and all sorts of things. And to me, it's books like that we think, oh, it's just fiction, and a lot of what we see on TV, I'm going back to his Dark Materials, which we started with, could be perceived as a little bit Harry Potterish, and like the Golden Compass, that it's fairy tales, but there's some really superb elements within there if you watch, to the point where I've actually watched both seasons twice through, because you always catch something more, and the truth, and where did somebody come up with that information. So I've loved those books that highlight, the question to me is, if they can do it, then we must have the ability to do it. Or is it only for the few? Is it only for the masters? and really to find out how we can awaken our magnificence. And I know this is also part of the work that you do when you have sessions with people, and through gamma wave healing, to clear the clutter and get them to become aware of, their magnificent heritage, not just in the ancestral lineage in this time space reality, but also, across different dimensions. And maybe when what we see in the aurora, what we see with the city in the sky, is a hint of the possibility of different realities that we can create or choose to reside in.
Absolutely. I feel like this is a movement that is going on across the whole world right now. As a big part of this shift that we're experiencing is at a frequency level. And so as everybody's baseline frequency is being increased as a result of the galactic current sheet that is coming in, and the solar emissions, all these things that we talked about previously, all of this energy is combining, or is having this influence upon us that is creating this phase shift in consciousness. And as we are going through this phase shift, we are accessing things, out of our cellular memory, out of our DNA, deep within our DNA. There's this ancestral memory. And then there are all these other layers of holographic reality that have been experienced, that are overlaid. Maybe we could visualize them as like stacked, like layers of reality. And that's where this bleed through is coming in. And so people are experiencing this all over the place, and are waking up to the magnificence of what we can be. Now, on the polarized side of that is that this system of control that is no longer frequency specific to this world, it's no longer compatible with where we're going. That system of control is struggling and struggling and struggling to try to convince everybody that we need to be in a state of fear, that everything is going to hell in a handbasket, that it's like it's hopeless, and I accept none of that reality at all. I mean, I not to be some Pollyanna rejecting what's in front of me, because I understand people are having very challenging experiences, but from the perspective that I am operating with is that this is the moment. This has been foretold for thousands of years through all of the ancient civilizations. They all were pointing at this moment, and we are all here. Every single human that is ensouled, that is on this earth right now, is here for a specific reason, to participate in this. And using that, that authenticity that you're talking about finding the truth of who we are. I believe that is for me, that's the core mission perhaps right now, and for many other people. And as that authenticity expresses, we really begin to wake up into the magnificence of who we are, and just how led astray we have been by our alleged leaders and spiritual guidance, that has just systematically controlled this world.
And being able to sit with yourself and utilize your additional senses of what really sits with me, that sense of knowing, that sense of intuition when you're being told something that isn't true, and realizing what we've been fed. So to a certain extent, the fear that many people have found themselves in, the anxiety, the stress, the way they've always known it, has actually created a fast track to start questioning. You can either
Absolutely.
close yourself down, or to me, this is a magnificent opportunity to question the narrative, to trust yourself, to expand your awareness and step into that magnificence, and question, this convergence of timelines that's coming together in a sort of culmination, that, you can look at it as, oh my goodness, something's going to happen, or you can look at it as bring it on, and welcome the excitement, because what do they say? Chaos creates evolution. It's crisis that pushes you forward. And
Sure.
if we're going to stay at the same frequency, then everything stays the same. In order to shift, then you've got to stir the pot, and that's where this chaos is doing it. And I feel, what we were talking about last time, the solar activity is also giving us a way to fast track and wake up and get that surge of energy, and embody it, and be ready to let it be in us and awaken us in wonderful ways, rather than let it tear us down, so that we can accrete more, be more, and be excited about the possibilities to come forth. I always say I didn't come around this time to sit in fear. We're and I know you're of the same ilk, to speak up, to speak out, and to utilize what you've been prepared for, and that connection you have with Alpha Centauri to support people during this time, which I know you're doing in the most beautiful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that movement that you describe of moving through the fear, moving through the resistance in order to stand up, that for me and my journey that I've been on in the personal journey, the professional journey, that was really a big challenge in being able to trust the information that I've been receiving, to speak and to share that information fearlessly. I was kind of instructed, probably going back about 10 years ago. I suddenly started getting this very strong compulsion to begin posting information about the UFOs, about my close encounter, about crops formations, crop circles and things like that. And to do so fearlessly, like to not include any level of a fear frequency on the information. And that was a way for me to really learn to stand in that truth and in that sovereignty, to share the information. And just like all of my experiences on my professional journey, that as I have found that when you stand in that truth, the reflection that comes back is immediate and is very strong, that is corroborating what it is that you're receiving. Now, of course, there always are going to be those polarity reflections and the naysayers, but that's like my friend Michael Tellinger, that he says, fish where the fish are. Like, don't bother yourself with people that would be those naysayers, the doubt, the ridicule, like
Totally.
any of that kind of, yeah, you need to discount and reject all of that and exclude it from your operating system. And I agree. And what we find is the more that we stand in that level of truth and authenticity, it's almost like it gives other people permission to do so for themselves, to create their own boundaries, to stand strong, to find that courage. And we all are going through this in our own ways right now. Even those of us that are maybe like you or like me, that are working professionally to help facilitate people's journey, we all are involved in this journey together. And as we find that truth and that authenticity, I feel like that it changes that baseline resonant frequency, and that's where our phase shift has, in many ways, has already been achieved. We already have long since passed critical mass for this awakening, and right now it's like all of the puzzle pieces are just kind of like fitting back in together. And geez, what an exciting moment for all of us right now.
Which brings me round to maybe next topic, because, in terms of, people still say, well, how do I deal with this? And what about the fear, and what's happening? And, how do I, accrete more? Which brings me round to a lot of the work that you do, and a strong belief in me that a lot of our DNA has been shut down, and what they term junk DNA is
100%.
actually
Yeah.
potential DNA, the introns. So, and I know when you work with people, that's one of the first things you tap in to see where they're at with their sort of
Absolutely.
DNA and the potential within them and how to awaken. So I think that this may be a great place to pause for today's session, and then maybe tap into DNA, the potential, how to awaken
Yeah.
it, and where it's been switched off, and literally how to start turning it on, boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
whether that's through sort of the light language, through sound, or working with gamma wave healing, or some of the other
Hmm.
modalities around.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you for your take on the auroras, the cities in the sky. Yes, they are just possibly bleed throughs, but again, take what you want from it, and maybe. Like, as you said, when you go out in the sun, lie there, when you're in particular states, you can see them yourself, whether that's in the
Absolutely.
daytime or at night. So go out there, look at the sky, or look at the stars. Thank you,
Well,
Matthew.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Carol, and I'll look forward to continuing our conversation later.